Hello, my name is Dalton Hill, and today I'm interviewing Bunsey Bryant. So, Bunsey, what can you tell me about the Great Depression?
When the Depression hit, I was about 9 years old, and I lived at Pikeville, a little place called Big Show, and everything was rationed. You had to have stamps before you could buy food, and when you went to the store, they didn't have nothing like lard or oil or anything like that. It was tallow. That's what you had to use. And it come in a square-like container, and if you fixed that, if you fried potatoes or anything in that stuff, you had to eat it right then. If you didn't, it would stick to your mouth, and you couldn't eat it if it got cold. So the best thing that we done, we had hogs and we'd kill them, and have the grease from them. That's how we made it, and we wouldn't buy the tallow no more. If you got pop, you didn't buy the cans or the bottles. You had to take it like a gallon jar to the store, and they would just give you so many bottles, and they would open it and pour it in that gallon jar. That's how you got your pop. But everybody was so poor they couldn't afford nothing no way. And if you got shoes, they would give you like 2 pair of shoes a year, and they had pasteboard bottoms. And you had old galoshes, an old pair of old rubber galoshes that you had to buy to put over them to keep your feet dry. Because if you walked through water going to school, which we had to walk about 3 miles to get to school, and if you walked through water, they would come apart, and you wouldn't get no more shoes. You went barefoot the rest of the year. That's what happened, and lots of times that happened to me. I'd end up with no shoes. I had to go barefooted, and there was just a lot of things that happened back in those days. I can't think of everything. That's probably about what I can think of right now. But now that's the way it was in those days, and everybody went through the same thing. You had to have a book of stamps to get your food with, and when those stamps ran out, you done without. Unless you had a farm or you raised your food, you had nothing to eat. We were blessed because we had a farm. My dad worked hard. He worked in the mine, and he worked hard, and we had cows and pigs and chickens and things like that. We had our own food, or we couldn't make it. But nobody else. There's so many people that lived around us that had nothing. Of course, we helped them too, but now that's the way it was in those days. Very, very hard times.
So, can you tell me a little about Pearl Harbor?
Only thing I know about Pearl Harbor was my brother was blown up in Pearl Harbor, and he was missing for 5 years. We didn't even know that. We thought he was dead. Oh. And Dad called the president and everybody trying to find out something about my brother. And but finally one day he came in, and we didn't even know that he was alive. And Mother was milking. When he came in, Mother threw that big old thing of milk over top of her head, and it went everywhere. She thought she'd seen a ghost, but he was my brother. And he was hurt, He stayed in the hospital for months. We didn't even know he was alive. But everything was just blown up. He said he saw everything in this world there in Pearl Harbor. People were getting killed. Everything was just blown up, and people dying all around him. And then he was hurt. He was blown up. But it didn't kill him. But he lived and came home. So I thank God for all that, But that's about all I know about Pearl Harbor. Food was very cheap. Like a can of coffee cost about 25 cents. You got your pop if you could get it in a bottle, which you couldn't get it, but it was like a nickel a bottle. And ice cream was like 5 cents. But we didn't get it because, at that time everything was rationed and you couldn't get it. But when you could get it, that's what you paid for it. Canned food was very, very cheap. A pound of beans was like about 20 cents. And it just, everything was very, very cheap. A loaf of bread was like about 15 cents. And we went to Pikeville all the time on the train and spent our food stamps. Well, back then it wasn't food stamps, it was just called stamps. that you got from the government. Everybody got them. But food was very cheap, and if it hadn't been, people would have starved to death. And we went through some very hard times. And I mean, this day and time, our young generation, this day and time, could not survive what we went through. And you know, when you churned at home, you couldn't get milk then. Sometimes you couldn't even get milk. If you had a cow, you had your own milk. And we would take our milk, we'd put it up in a coal bank in a little pond of water and keep it cold, or put it in a well in a bucket, drop it down in the water, and keep our butter and milk cold. That's how we done it, because you didn't get it in the store. They didn't have it. Mm-hmm. So many things they didn't have, and so this had so much, and that was it, because everything was rationed, and you know they couldn't get it. So we went through some very rough times, but you know, I thank God we survived it. And I say all the time, we are survivors. Fire, all your fires, you had wood or coal. That's what you had, or you had froze to death. There wasn't no gas heat. There wasn't no electric heat. Most people didn't even have no power. We had oil lamps. And you ironed your clothes with an old iron. I mean, an old heavy iron that you put a handle on it, and you hold it up on the back of your old coal stove and iron your clothes. That's what you done. Made you starch out of old flour and water. That's how you done it back then. That was Depression days.
Well, that's Buncey with the Great Depression, you know, in Pearl Harbor. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Dalton.